he fix wrestlers' teeth for free in order to get photos and sell them?
He may have done that on occasion. It sounds like something he would do.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast. Monty DeFaro, seen only here out of Indie Music TV. George, thank you for joining Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, my friend.
George, you want to run that compliment by us again? They cut you out.
Yep.
Cut me out. Already I get cut out. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to come on your show. It's an honor. Thank you.
It's our honor,
You
sir.
are so welcome.
Did you enjoy WrestleMania?
I did very much. I thought they did a great job. To me, having it over 2 nights was much better than having it in one night, 7 hours, with me standing there trying to take pictures. It just got a little tedious. Over 2 nights, it broke it up. I enjoyed it a lot more. And I know you mentioned Stone Cold about Texas before. Seeing him again was a treat.
That had to be something. Are you a genuine wrestling fan? I mean, it might be obvious, but I'm asking. How much do you love wrestling, considering?
Well, I used to love it more when I really did my own magazines.
Mm-hmm.
When I used to write the magazines and do all the photos, I loved it more. Then I really was more into it than I am now. For me now, I take photos, but I don't feel like I'm as involved as I was when the 80s, 90s, and O's for a bit. I've actually been taking pictures for 50 years.
Wow.
Okay. A lot of people say that I'm a photographer, but through that time, for all the pictures I took, I used to write stories, but I don't get credit for all the magazines that I did, edited, and wrote stories for, and all the books that I put together.
What kind of emotions, when you were saying you were going and you were scanning pictures, what kind of emotions did that draw from you? I mean, that's got to be an emotional journey, especially sitting at home.
It brings me back. If I'm scanning something, it's Kevin Von Erich or Kerry Von Erich. I remember going to Texas, then I remember something that might have happened. It's going back to a lot of stuff. I pick it, no matter where I touch, I have photos of something or things that make me remember different instances in different times, in different places, different people. I noticed in your intro you had your photo with a lot of people, a lot of old friends I haven't seen in a while. It was a great opening you guys had.
I always saw your name next to so many amazing photos, and I even would see you sometimes when I was at live matches, and I would always wonder, man, this guy is so lucky, but obviously it's got to be more than luck. How did this all start?
Okay, well, as a young kid, I was a wrestling fan at one time, and I remember seeing Bruno Sammartino in early 60s, Bruno Antonino Rocca, Pampero Firpo. I liked it. And then when the Beatles happened, you forget everything else, and I just wanted to be a Beatle, wanted to be a musician, and I learned how to play guitar, and I forgot all about wrestling. In 1970, there was a clipping in Daily News, Wrestling Tonight, and I told my girlfriend, who now I've been married to for 50 years,
Wow.
do you want to go to see wrestling? She says, wrestling? I said, yeah, I used to watch it years ago. And she said, okay. And I went to the garden, I brought my camera, and I said, oh, this is fun. And then they announced Sunnyside Gardens for the following weekend. And I said, I used to go to Sunnyside Gardens on a Saturday afternoon to see shows. And so we wound up going. And while I was there, I took pictures running up and down the aisle, and somebody stopped me and said, you must take good pictures. You got a great camera. I said, yeah, they're okay. Just if you want to, let me see them the next time you come here. So the next time I went there, I came with a bunch of photos, and the guy said, these pictures are great. You want to work for me?
Wow.
I worked for Ring magazine,
Right.
the boxing magazine.
Sure.
They had a wrestling magazine, Ring Wrestling. I
Yep.
said, yeah, okay. And I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know what he meant by "Do you want to work?" I just said, okay, and that's how it started.
Did you ever foresee it turning into a half a century worth of snapping pictures? I
No, I
mean,
didn't foresee it lasting
I
the
mean, my
following
God.
month. I mean,
Wow.
fella's name was Sanchez Acosta. Brought me down to the dressing room, introduced me to Arnold Skolin, who was in charge backstage of everything. And Arnold said, "Stay out, enjoy yourself, kid, but stay out of wrestler's way." And that was the creed I've lived by: stay out of the wrestler's way. And I went and shot ringside, not knowing what I was doing, and it led to whatever. I met Jimmy Valiant. He became my first article, my first story, and I befriended the Grand Wizard, who then introduced me everywhere. And that's how it started, really.
And back then, they made you keep kayfabe, I'm assuming, for these
Well,
articles that you wrote.
But people say that, when you were reporting on stuff, what am I going to say? Oh no, that's not really Chief J. Strongbow. It's Joe Scarpa. I'm writing about what you see in the ring.
Right.
I wasn't there to divulge any secrets, like that. People didn't write about the baseball players outside of the incident with Billy Martin and Mickey Mantle at the I forgot where
At the
they
club.
were
Yeah.
at the club. But before that, you didn't read about what people did on the outside until Jim Bouton wrote Ball 4, maybe.
Right.
You reported on what you did and what you saw, and that's what I did. I didn't
Right.
try to fake anything or keep anything from anybody or kayfabe. I mean, it's just the way I lived and what I did.
How were you welcomed by the pro wrestlers when you first came into the business? I mean, anybody give you a hard
Well,
time?
not at all. Well, the Grand Wizard introduced me around, and I had somebody who introduced me, and he actually brought me to Vince McMahon Sr. Says, if we need anything, this guy can really help us. This guy's really good, really good. And we just went from there, And once they seen you and they saw that you didn't divulge what you're not supposed to, just if you did your job like you were supposed to, you had no problem. And I had no problem. That's what it was. And then I would travel to different territories, and I would always run into somebody who I knew from, call it New York, call it from the WWWF, who then would say, "Oh, this guy's good. He took care of me when I was in New York." And then he would bring guys to me. I remember running into Superstar Graham in Houston,
Right.
and then I did a whole bunch of stories on him. And then when he was coming to New York, he called me, and we became friends. But that's how it was, You just built on what you did and what you had and what you knew.
You mentioned earlier about when you were down in Texas with the Von Erichs. What was the dynamics with the Von Erichs at that time when you were there?
Well, they were their whole lineup, their whole crew were young wrestlers. Brian Adidas, Iceman Parsons, Gino Hernandez, all the Von Erichs, Kerry, Kevin, Chris, Michael, David. They were all young guys, and they were catering then to a younger audience than what used to watch wrestling in New York. And you always got the kids, yes, and then you would get the older fans. The Von Erichs were getting the 18 to 25 that really were no longer into wrestling or wouldn't have been into wrestling. And their shows at the Sportatorium were real exciting and real good. They were doing things that you didn't see a lot of other wrestlers doing. I mean, now what they do is crazy, but at that time when you saw the Von Erichs doing what they did, it was ahead of its time.
How difficult has it been for you to photograph wrestling as it's changed? Because as you said, now it's crazy. I mean, how does the great George Napolitano find the right spot when they're flipping and cartwheeling a million miles an hour?
Let's see, but watching it and doing it and being involved for so long, you kind of know who's going to do what and where they're going to be. I just have it's just an instinct. But I learned from ECW how to stay away from ladders and then from in Puerto Rico, how to avoid the flames of fire around the ring, and just what to do and what not to do. You always had to, you always have to look for the person next to you, and know that the camera, the video camera, is on to your right or to your left because they can't see you. You know, and look, I've seen matches my whole life, but through this little hole in the back of a camera. I don't have the here it is. That's the viewfinder. I don't have the wherewithal to sit and watch a match full screen and then watch it replay and then criticize it. I was just watching it through the circle.
Right.
And
George, you've been around so many legends in your career. Which wrestler would you say was your closest friend?
Every era was different. When I say every decade was different, probably superstar Billy Graham. If you want to say if anybody, superstar Graham. I met him in Houston, Texas, and then when he came to New York, he was a bodybuilder. And I went to the World Bodybuilding Federation, took pictures of him, and then I would pick him up at the airport and drive him to Boston and Providence and Connecticut and wherever. That was probably the guy. But then I was close with Steve Austin. I was close with The Rock. I was close with a lot of people in different times. The Grand Wizard, the early in the 70s into the early 80s, until he unfortunately passed. Friends with the Wizard, who then introduced me to the Sheik in Florida. I see you got the picture with the Rock. I remember him. He came up to me when he first came into the WWF, and he says, "I know you my whole life. You photographed my grandfather. You photographed my father. If there's anything I can do for you ever, please, you gotta ask me." But I didn't need to ask him. I was okay. I'm not saying I know everything, but it was his offer. And then every time he's seen me since then, and I was taken at the Time 100. He was one of the Time 100 greatest celebrities of that era. Mm-hmm. I believe that was 2-3 years ago. And when I saw him again, he gives me a hug. Every time he sees me, he makes sure they ask, "How am I doing? Do I need anything? And what do I want?"
We recently lost Scott Hall. Your memories of Scott Hall? I saw a photo with you at the beginning of Scott's career. What's your memories of the great Razor?
Well, he was. I knew him as Scott Hall with Kurt Hennig, and I remember taking him after the matches. I took him to a place called Shout, which was a 60s, 70s club in 47th Street in the city. And I took him all around, took him to the Carnegie Deli. I took him to a bunch of places after the matches, and we just formed a bond. He was just a great, great guy. Then he became Razor Ramon. Oh yeah, people say he had an attitude, he had this, he had that, but to me, he was very nice, and I reciprocated. We were really friendly, and I felt really bad. You know, I don't want to say too much, but it's unfortunate what happened to him.
Oh yeah.
To me, he was a great guy. He lived his part. He loved what he was doing. He was sensational. Really, really nice.
Are you friendly with Billy Graham currently? Do you still speak to Superstar?
I speak to him occasionally, but we're not. We have lost touch, so to say.
Okay.
That's it. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, but he's had different. He's had a lot of different things, from injuries and different problems that he's had, and we are no longer close like we were. Okay. But if I were to see him or he were to see me, we'd still be tight.
Do you think Billy is kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like ruining his legacy with his bitterness over the last 10 years?
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely do.
We kind of feel that way too.
Do. And like we drifted apart for that kind of reasons. I mean,
really?
But yes, he had a legacy, and he was great at what he did when he did it. He was the prototype of Hulk Hogan. I mean, in all honesty, he was Hulk Hogan before Hulk Hogan. He had the pythons. He had the 26-inch pythons, and and a lot of people copied from him, including the governor that you're going to have on your show in a couple of weeks,
There you
who
go.
copied Superstar Graham. At that time, a lot of people did. And prior to Superstar, there were very few wrestlers who had a muscular physique like that. There was Earl Maynard and maybe Rocky Johnson. Always had a great body, but the wrestlers at that time were not known for their physique, for their body. They were a lot of them were heavy and whatever, out of shape and characters. That was what wrestling was, and I think Superstar is the one that kind of changed it to the more muscular look.
Do you think it was wrong to take the belt off him? Because he always bitches about that to
Well,
this day.
he bitches about it, but you know what? Everything has its time. They
Right.
could have could they have gone longer with him? Oh, definitely. People were cheering him, and to what I know, the McMahons didn't know how to control him. They didn't know what they can do with him. They were afraid. They were afraid. They had something that was going to be bigger than what they are. It was Mr. McMahon Senior and Vince Junior.
Yeah. So you were in Madison Square Garden all those years. We had Bob Backlund in studio. We have this great respect for Backlund.
Oh, yeah.
But, he got a bad reputation saying that he couldn't carry a card. You were in those garden matches. You saw the crowd. Did you think Backlund...
The people didn't come to see the undercard. They came to see the main event.
I agree.
The undercard was the icing on the cake.
Right.
That was the extra. But all during that era, and I want to pick 74, 5, 6, 7, 8, WWF. They used to sell out the Garden. Then they used to sell out the Felt Forum on our screen to watch it. So it wasn't like it wasn't that big. The MSG once a month was the pay-per-view, so to say. And they used to advertise. If you don't come, you ain't going to see it. You had to be there to be part of what was going on.
Especially before the days of cable television. That's for sure.
Oh, for sure.
That is for sure. You've worked for Senior and Junior. What sort of relationship did you have with those two?
Well,
Vince?
Mr. McMahon Senior was the one who really got behind me. He was really nice, and I was the unofficial, official WWF photographer. If they needed something, they knew they would call me. I mean, people always ask what's your most famous picture, and it was the one with Andre holding up the four women.
Yeah.
Andre
Man.
two and two.
That's so great.
And I took that in Philadelphia. Mr. McMahon stopped me in Philadelphia early on and said, I need a picture of Andre to show his strength and his size. And I says, you know what? You got the woman on the card tonight. Can we take a picture of Andre with the girls? Not knowing what it was going to be. And he said, oh, yeah. Have Arnold get the woman. So Arnold went and called all the girls, Arnold Skull and Haters. And here's Andre. They said hello. And Andre puts his arm down and puts his other arm down. Two girls get on his left arm. Two girls get on his right arm. He picks them up. I take one picture, take two pictures. Boss, got it? I says, got it, boss. And that was it. I took two pictures. I couldn't look in the back of the camera to see if the exposure was right, see if the flash went off. I took two photos, and that's what I did.
So he basically just picked them up like tablespoons.
They picked up two on one hand, two on the other.
Unbelievable.
Stood up. People say, "Oh, that's not the one," but that's a recreation.
What is
All right. Well,
Wait
of
a
course,
second.
That's Jeff for you.
Jeff!
Good job, Jeff. Well done.
It's
That's
okay,
okay.
George.
That's
You
a
can laugh, George.
recreation.
Please laugh, George.
Those girls
my
are
God.
midgets.
So,
that's
who
okay.
took this
But that's
one?
the idea.
Ken
They
Napolitano?
recreate-
What's going on here?
They
Whatever.
recreated the photo. That was
That's
it.
a pit drawing, Farrell.
Oh, is that what it is? I got sunglasses on. Oh, so do you. Never mind. Never mind. Unbelievable. But it was
Well,
that
that's
effortless
okay.
for
That was
Andre,
really
huh, George? That effortless to just be able
that
to
was
just,
that was the idea. And
wow.
so Mr. McMahon, and also too, when there was the Ali and Noki thing,
Right.
and Ali came to Philadelphia, and I took pictures of Ali getting in the ring with Gorilla Monsoon. Monsoon tosses him, and as soon as it was over, Mr. McMahon said, "Can you do something with that?" I says, "I'll bring it to New York." And I drove from Philadelphia to UPI in New York, and I used it on the back page of many newspapers across the country. And once that happened, then I could do no wrong. I mean, that was the first time that really wrestling was presented as something other than wrestling.
Were you there during the transfer of power from junior, senior to junior?
Yes, yes, I was.
How was that? And how was Junior towards you? Because I'm sure Junior was making a lot of major changes at the time.
Well, yeah, and he was very nice. I knew what was going to happen. He spoke to me about it, and let's just say that I was doing what I was doing, wrestling scene, wrestling all-star TV wrestler, and I said I enjoy doing what I'm doing. And he says, but soon I'm going to take over the world. And nobody believed him. Myself, I was a little reluctant about it. And I told some people about it. They said, no, that can't happen. But I knew it. He told me. And I had a chance to work with the WWF at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know how they were going to do what they were going to do. And I was happy doing what I was doing. So we had a parting of the ways. That's all.
Okay.
I got nothing bad to say. It's just what happened. I know I've heard people tell me, oh, that I knew Superstar was winning. Well, you know what? I drove Superstar to Baltimore from Long Island. He lived down Long Beach. And I drove him to Baltimore. And on the way there, he says, hey, you better have a lot of film tonight. I says, a lot of film? You're wrestling Bruno. He says, oh, yeah, it'll be a good match. I says, I'm tired of you and Bruno. I had more pictures than I can ever use.
There you go.
That's how he told me that he was winning. Tonight's gonna be different. I said, yeah, come on, Billy. It's gonna be too different. And that was my knowledge driving from Long Island to Baltimore. And he wasn't trying to keep it away from me. He was trying to tell me, but I couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
Right.
Were you in shock that night? Like, did you drop your camera?
I was more in shock that with like the rest of the crowd, they just like it was like a hush. Nobody knew what went on. I think he had, if I remember correctly, Billy had his foot on the ropes or he pinned him. Usually, what happens when something like that is the referee then recalls it, or the announcer would say, due to some technicality, Bruno. I'm sorry, Bruno. Bruno is still the champion.
Right.
Like they would make some kind of announcement if something went on. But he calls me and says, we got to get out of here. So as soon as the match was over, I had to run to the back. He didn't take a shower. He didn't do anything. He put his clothes on. We drove right back to New York.
We run across a lot of different people, and they have all these stories. Like, clearly everybody knows who you are. Like, whether you want to call yourself an icon, that's up for debate. We're calling you an icon because you are. But
Thank you.
But
True.
there's other people that make statements. So it's like, you don't know who's Fugazi. So I'm going to throw a name at you and tell me if you know anything about this guy and help us out. And maybe if you have a story about him.
Can I plead the fifth on some?
You could plead the fifth on all you want.
If you want, that's fine.
I'm just going to give you one name because I hear this guy's name and I don't know what he's about, and I need someone clarity. So we had John Arizzi in, and John Arizzi, we call him like the godfather of events, and clearly he did such a good job. But there's another guy that comes up every so often, and I need someone of your expertise to help me with this. Dr. Mike Lano.
John Arizzi's friend.
Oh, I don't know.
Is that what? Hey, wait a minute. That's what he's famous for? Never mind. Thank you. Thanks, George. We got what we needed.
Do you know Dr. Mike Lano?
Of course.
Is he the real deal?
I haven't seen him in a couple years.
Does he call you in the middle of the night?
But he was around. He was around a long time.
Okay.
But as far as traveling, he went to Japan early on a couple times.
Couple of
But
times.
as far as like traveling through the different territories and knowing a lot of people, he really didn't.
Right.
But
Okay.
he knows a lot of wrestling. A lot of times just being around it, you learn through osmosis.
Right.
But
Right.
I don't think he has any first-hand knowledge of anything special through all those years.
Well, the reason I bring him up because he's always touting himself as a great photographer whenever I hear him on some smaller podcasts. And I'm like, who is this guy? And I've never heard of him. And I thought, you know what? Let's go to the icon
Yeah.
photographer, and if he knows the other photographer.
Yeah, he knows him as John Arizzi's friend. I'm sorry. You can plead the fifth, George. Go ahead. It's fine. It's fine.
He's He's been around a long time.
Okay.
He's been around a long time,
Yeah.
and
So have I. Oy.
All right, I'll ask you one last
as
question
far
about it.
as what he knows, I really can't attest to what he really knows.
Did he fix wrestlers' teeth for free in order to get photos and sell them?
He may have done that on occasion. It sounds like something he would do. I would drive Grand Wizard, Fred Blassie, Lou Albano, and whoever was in the main event to Madison Square Garden. I would pick them up at the hotel, and I would drive them every month to the garden. As soon as Lou Albano got in the car, he was on, cursing at people, yelling, screaming, going insane. My car used to get rocked and shook and shaked. And he would bang on the side door and curse at the people. He was on. So I was very friendly with all of them. And I would take all three to the garden every month. Besides taking them wherever else I would take them if they needed. I was really close with Fred Blassie too. And Freddie was getting up in age and he couldn't get around as much. And then I would have a friend sometimes drive him if he needed a ride.
All right, so George, we're almost out of time. We're going to hit you with something called the Pharaoh's Final Question.
Oh, no.
Where Jimmy Farrow,
no.
unscripted,
Yep.
comes up with any type of question.
It's a
He's been
ridiculous
known
question.
to ask people if they like
Stop.
boxers or briefs,
Boxers or
ketchup or
briefs.
mustard, whatever it's going to be.
Ketchup or
So
mustard.
have at it, Jimmy.
You know, it's funny. I usually ask a serious question, but since you did it, I'm going to do it this one time. And bear with me, George. You're the teacher, and I want you to grade this student as a photographer. Felix Unger, pass or fail?
Pass.
He passes
tried
Felix
hard.
Unger.
Wow.
Interesting.
He
Okay.
tried hard. He worked hard. He wanted to get that image, and I always remember one of the openings where they opened the door and he's developing with the negative and it spoiled all the pictures, and it reminds me of a couple times that I was developing photos and the door opens and all the pictures that I took destroyed.
Brilliant. Oscar. Excellent.
Your
him,
Mount
him.
Rushmore of
Yeah.
professional wrestling, please.
First of all, Andre the Giant.
Okay.
Andre,
Sure.
he's known as the wrestler. Andre, everybody knows Andre just from being Andre. I think Andre, I have to say Bruno Sammartino. And again, you're going to, depending on your age, the Mount Rushmore changes. I think The Rock belongs on there. Maybe not as high, but for what he did in the 90s. And then Hulk Hogan.
Okay. He said Hulk Hogan, so
I know I'm
we're
missing
good.
people.
Yeah, no, that's as long as you said Hogan.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, I don't think at this point he gets the credit he deserves. I mean, he did what he did. And everything is built off of Hulk Hogan, seriously.
Yeah.
He
Yep.
he promulgated it, he carried it forward, and he made it very popular. And to this day, the people don't like, for some reason, he doesn't have that oomph anymore that he had.
Right.
He should.